So good evening, my name is David Porter, and I'm proud to be a member of Orlando Against Police Crimes, a grassroots organization that campaigns for police accountability and community control of police. You know, the shirt I'm wearing tonight about lynching seems kind of extreme, but you know what we're talking about? Lynching is basically extrajudicial killing of people, and that's exactly what we're talking about tonight. Specifically, we're talking about the case of Luis Lopez and Tyrone Bartley. You know, on any job, if you did something where you caused one of your coworkers or caused somebody else, a customer, somebody, to be killed, you would probably lose that job. But somehow, when you work for police, that doesn't happen. In fact, you get paid time off, and then you get to come back. And that's what brings us down here to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So, several years ago, maybe almost 20 years ago, when there were police shootings and people were questioning whether police should have shot the person or not, they came up with a brilliant idea. They said, well, you know, why don't we refer this to some outside party to investigate that? And they said, well, who would that be? And they said, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And we're here in front of the offices of the Orlando branch of Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So FDLE is supposed to be like the state's FBI. So they're the ones who they help out with tough cases. They help out small departments that don't really have, you know, a lot of detectives, and they also set the standards for police education and police training, you know, in Florida. So the idea was they would assign the case to FDLE, and then FDLE being not Orlando Police or not the Sheriff's Office or not Ocoee Police, that they would have a free hand to go ahead and, you know, and call balls and strikes on the cases. But what we have found out over time, and I mean, I used to be a Sentinel journalist and then just a person in this community, when they refer cases to FDLE to look at shootings that were questionable, FDLE, this building looks like a building, but it's really a washing machine. They drop the cops in the top, they drop a dirty cop on the top, and he comes out clean in the bottom. And that's what happened in this case. We're specifically talking about the cases of Luis Lopez and Tyrone Bartley. So Luis Lopez, earlier this year, in February of this year, police were called his house because he had someone had broken into his house and he was trying to get that person out of the house, and he was wrestling with the person, and so he called a neighbor for help, and the neighbor in turn did what any regular person would do. They called 911. Well, when the Orange County Sheriff's deputies appeared, they went around the back, they looked in the window, and they saw two guys fighting, just wrestling around in the kitchen, and through the open window they ordered them to stop. But the two guys, and the deputies were told on the radio that there was a language issue, but the deputies are yelling commands at them in English, because both of these gentlemen apparently had very little English, and they're yelling commands at them, and they're not understanding, they're continuing to fight. Then one of the cops says, hey, he's got a knife, and both cops fire, and the person who they shot was Mr. Lopez, who in fact was the victim, and he died. And then sometime later on, police realized that he was a victim, and the other guy, you know, was a person who broke in. So then, through the state attorney's office, they charged the other guy with murder. They took that case to trial a couple of weeks ago, and lo and behold, when it went to trial, he was found not guilty. So that's what happened in that case. So Mr. Lopez is dead. He's in his house. He had done nothing wrong. He wasn't out in the street. He wasn't a criminal. He was in his house. He needed help, and he was killed. And the deputies responsible for that, I've got their names here because I always forget their names, are Alex Duran and Paul Ortiz. Now, we asked the sheriff back this summer, we saw him at a community meeting about these cases. He said, oh, I can't talk about it because it's all been referred to FDLE and this and that, and why he can't talk about it. Well, anyhow, these two deputies are now back on the street. These two deputies who shot the wrong person in a house, and they're acting like it's some kind of an oopsie. Like, oh, you know, I passed the street I'm supposed to turn on. A man is dead. This past May, Mr. Tyrone Bartley was in a rooming house he was staying in the Pine Hills area. This house had been raided 2 weeks before. Well, not raided, had been visited by police 2 weeks before because another person who lived in another room of that rooming house it had some kind of domestic dispute. When the police came, they saw drugs in that room. So they sent the SWAT team back 2 weeks later. The SWAT team goes around and starts kicking doors. They go into the house, and they go back to one of the back rooms where Mr. Bartley was, and he hears all this noise in the house. He opens the door, and a SWAT deputy shot him 6 times with an M16. Remember, Osama bin Laden was shot 3 times. So they said in that case, they later claimed that, oh, well, the reason why the SWAT deputy shot is because Tyrone was reaching for a gun behind the door, and they had this picture of a gun that he had. He in fact did have a rifle in the room. The rifle was not behind the door. The rifle was in the closet. Now, I'm not saying Sheriff Mina goes on TV and he says, oh, the guy's reaching for a gun and this and that. I'm not saying Sheriff Mina was lying, but I'm saying the cops who told him the gun was behind the door, they were lying. That case also went to FDLE. They dropped it in the top, came out the bottom, whitewash. That cop was back on the street. I would argue that those deputies are very dangerous people. I mean, they're really dangerous out on the street, and they got away with it once, so why would they not do it again? They're walking, those 2 cops and those 2 cases, and those are just 2. We know of other cases. Those are just 2. They're walking, talking cases for police accountability. And in the end, 2 law-abiding men were shot dead in their own homes, and nobody's held accountable. In fact, the sheriff didn't even apologize to the families. I mean, who does that? And you don't even apologize. They don't do anything. So we're just supposed to forget that this happened. Where is the justice in that? Why didn't the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, why didn't they do their job and find these cops, at the very least, committed manslaughter? And they should have been charged, and they should be down at the state courthouse being tried for manslaughter or some form of murder. And this is what we're looking for. So, you know, officials get away with this stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that they get away with in fascist states. We just had the No Kings demonstration this past weekend. All this stuff is connected. The same tactics that the IOF use over in Gaza are the same kind of tactics the cops are using in our local streets. And that's why we've got to have more accountability from them. So to the FDLE tonight, we say, number 1, release the reports from these 2 cases. Release the details that you supposedly found so we can examine them and see what they actually say. And the second part is, stop whitewashing bad cops. Thank you.